This is a skull. It's nearly 3 feet long, bigger than a fully grown wolf, head to tail. The jaws are built to crush bone. The teeth are designed to tear. And for over 100 years, this single skull was all we had. No spine. No legs. No body. Just a head the size of a dinner table, pulled out of the Mongolian desert, with no skeleton anywhere near it. Scientists have argued ever since about exactly what it was, how big it got, and what it did, because all they have is the face of the animal, frozen in stone, snarling at them across 45 million years. Hold this skull in your mind. We'll come back to it. Because here's the thing everyone gets wrong about prehistory: when people picture the scariest animals that ever lived, they picture dinosaurs. They're wrong. The dinosaurs were gone. And what came after, and what came before, was, in many ways, so much worse. Forget the dinosaurs. Let me show you what really ruled the land. Long before the dinosaurs existed, about 300 million years ago, the forests were ruled by something that should not be allowed to exist at this size. Arthropleura. A millipede. Except this millipede was up to 8.5 feet long and weighed over 100 pounds. It was the largest land invertebrate that has ever lived. A bug longer than a grown man, clattering across the forest floor on dozens of legs, leaving trackways so wide that when scientists first found the fossilized footprints, they assumed some large reptile had made them. Now, here's the part that's almost funny, and the part that makes it scarier, not less. Arthropleura probably wasn't even a predator. As far as we can tell, it mostly ate plants and rotting wood. It didn't need to hunt you. It just existed, at the size of a small car, in the same forests your distant ancestors would one day walk through. Imagine pushing through thick prehistoric ferns and hearing the leaves rustle beside you, and turning to see 8 feet of armored, many-legged insect calmly chewing on a log, completely indifferent to you. It wouldn't attack. It wouldn't have to. The sheer existence of it is the nightmare. So how did a bug get this big? One word: oxygen. Back then, the atmosphere was packed with far more oxygen than today, and insects breathed through their bodies, not lungs. More oxygen meant they could grow to monstrous sizes without suffocating. The air itself was building giants. When the oxygen levels finally dropped, the giant bugs died with them. We are, in a very real sense, lucky to live in a world where the air can no longer support a millipede the size of a crocodile. And we know it really was that big, because Arthropleura left its signature behind in 2 ways. First, the fossilized trackways, long parallel rows of footprints pressed into ancient mud, some of them nearly 20 inches wide, marching in a perfectly straight line across what is now Europe and North America. And second, in 2018, a chunk of its actual fossilized body the size of a person was found tumbling out of a cliff in northern England, exposed when a boulder fell onto a beach. That single piece was enough to confirm the scale. This wasn't a guess. The biggest bug in history was real, it was armored, and it was walking through the same forests where the first amphibians were learning to crawl onto land. But at least Arthropleura was a vegetarian. The next animal was not, and it was 47 feet long. After the dinosaurs were wiped out, the earth turned into a greenhouse, hot, wet, and dripping. And in those steaming swamps, evolution built the largest snake that has ever existed. Titanoboa. 47 feet long. Over a ton. A snake so thick that at its widest point it would have come up to your waist. The vertebrae they pulled out of a Colombian coal mine were the size of dinner plates, and at first the team thought they'd found a crocodile. They hadn't. They'd found a snake that could have swallowed a crocodile. And it could tell us something genuinely unsettling. Snakes are cold-blooded, they need heat from their environment to function. For a snake to get this enormous, the world around it had to be staggeringly hot, year-round. By studying Titanoboa, scientists could actually calculate the temperature of the ancient tropics, around 90 degrees Fahrenheit, constantly, for millions of years. Titanoboa is, in effect, a fossilized thermometer. Its very size is proof of how brutal that greenhouse world was. Picture the hunt. Titanoboa spent most of its time in the water, where its weight didn't matter, drifting through warm rivers like a living current. It didn't chase. It waited. And when something came to drink, all that muscle would close around it, a constriction force that nothing its size could survive. It didn't even need venom. It just squeezed until the problem stopped moving. For 10 million years, this was the apex predator of the post-dinosaur world, a snake longer than a school bus, ruling the rivers of South America. And think about what it took to feed a body that size. A modern anaconda, itself a monster, tops out around 20 feet. Titanoboa was more than double that, carrying a ton of muscle that needed constant fuel. It ate large fish, crocodile relatives, anything it could overpower, swallowing prey whole and then lying still for weeks while its body slowly digested an entire animal. There's something uniquely horrifying about a predator that doesn't need to be fast, doesn't need to be clever, and doesn't need to fight. It only needs to be patient and impossibly strong. Titanoboa was both. It was the swamp itself deciding to close around you. But Titanoboa stayed mostly in the water. The next monster was built to chase you across dry land, and it had a mouthful of venom. Now come forward in time, to a place that already has a reputation for trying to kill you, Australia. Except this is Australia during the Ice Age, and the most dangerous thing on the continent wasn't a snake or a spider. It was a lizard the size of a saltwater crocodile. Megalania. A monitor lizard, the same family as today's Komodo dragon, but scaled up to somewhere between 15 and 23 feet long, weighing as much as half a ton. The largest venomous land animal we know ever existed. And yes, venomous. Megalania was closely related to the Komodo dragon, and modern research shows Komodos deliver a venom that lowers blood pressure and prevents clotting, so their prey bleeds out and goes into shock. Now scale that system up to an animal the length of a car. A single bite from Megalania wouldn't just wound you. It would start a clock. The venom would drop your blood pressure, your wound wouldn't stop bleeding, and the lizard wouldn't even need to win the fight up front. It could bite once, back off, and simply follow you, for hours, for as long as it took, waiting for you to collapse. And here's the detail that should genuinely bother you: Megalania didn't die out in some distant prehistoric age. It was still alive when the first humans arrived in Australia, roughly 50,000 years ago. Our own species shared that continent with a venomous, half-ton monitor lizard that could run you down and patiently wait for the venom to finish the job. There are people whose ancestors saw this thing. The nightmare wasn't ancient. It was recent. In fact, some researchers believe Megalania may be the origin of certain Aboriginal stories about a giant, terrifying reptile that stalked the land, folk memory, passed down for tens of thousands of years, of an animal that science only formally identified in 1859. Think about that. The people living on that continent may have remembered this monster long after it was gone, in their oldest stories, while the rest of the world had no idea it had ever existed. And it was an ambush hunter. It didn't roar or announce itself. It lay still in the scrub, blending into the dry land, until something walked close enough. The most dangerous thing about Megalania wasn't its size or its venom. It was that you'd never see it until it had already bitten you. But a giant reptile is one thing. The next animal had wings, a beak like an axe, and a habit of running prey down at full sprint. For millions of years after the dinosaurs, one group of animals quietly kept the spirit of the velociraptor alive, and they were birds. Terror birds. And one of them, Titanis, did something none of the others managed. It left South America and invaded North America. Picture a flightless bird up to 10 feet tall, built entirely for running, with long powerful legs and a skull the size of a horse's head, tipped with a hooked beak strong enough to crack bone. This was not a bird that pecked. Terror birds hunted like apex predators. The leading idea is that Titanis would run its prey down, and these birds were fast, capable of sprinting after anything on the open plains, and then use that massive reinforced beak like a pickaxe, driving it down with the full force of its neck muscles in repeated, brutal strikes. No wrestling. No grappling. Just precise, hammering blows until whatever it was chasing stopped moving. It was a 500-pound bird that killed with blunt force trauma. For a long time, North and South America were separate continents, and South America had become a strange laboratory where birds, not mammals, ran the top of the food chain. Then the two continents joined, and the terror birds marched north into a land full of mammalian predators, and for a while, they competed and won. A giant killer bird, descended from the same lineage as the chickens in your backyard, striding across ancient Florida, hunting horses and anything else it could catch. The dinosaurs never truly left. They just put on feathers and kept hunting. But even a 10-foot killer bird would step aside for the animal we're about to meet, because it had a reputation so vicious that paleontologists nicknamed it the Terminator pig. Meet the hell pig. Daeodon. Although calling it a pig is almost an insult to how terrifying it was. It stood around 6 feet tall at the shoulder, taller than most men, with a head nearly 3 feet long covered in bony lumps and flanges, a mouth full of thick teeth, and a jaw that could crush bone. It was the size of a bison, built like a tank, and it ran on the same plains as early horses and camels about 20 million years ago. And here's what makes the hell pig genuinely chilling: it ate everything. Daeodon was an omnivore with the bite of a predator. It could grind up roots and plants, sure, but it could also scavenge carcasses, crush the bones to get at the marrow, and there's strong evidence it actively killed other animals when it wanted to. We've even found fossil bone beds suggesting these things would ambush and steal kills from other predators, using sheer size and that bone-crushing jaw to bully everything else off the meal. Imagine a 6-foot-tall, bone-crushing boar that's also smart enough to let something else do the hunting, then take the food by force. There's a reason its nickname stuck. The hell pig had the body of a livestock animal blown up to monstrous proportions and the temperament of a predator that had nothing to fear. It looked almost familiar, and that's exactly what made it worse. Your brain says farm animal. Then it turns toward you, and every instinct you have says run. And the fossils tell us these things were not gentle with each other either. Paleontologists have found Daeodon skulls with healed-over bite marks that exactly match the jaws of other Daeodon, meaning one hell pig had its entire head inside the mouth of another and survived. That's not a feeding behavior. That's a level of aggression most modern animals never approach. Picture two bison-sized, bone-crushing monsters fighting over territory or a carcass, each one capable of biting down on the other's skull. The hell pig didn't just terrorize everything around it. It terrorized its own kind. But size eventually wins, and the next animal was the largest meat-eating land mammal that ever lived. It was a bear. And it was bigger than you can imagine. Every animal we've met so far would have looked up, literally up, at this one. Arctotherium. The giant short-faced bear of South America, and the largest carnivorous land mammal that science has ever confirmed. Standing on its hind legs, it reached around 11 to 13 feet tall, and the biggest individuals weighed in at over 1.5 tons. A bear that, standing up, could look into a second-story window. But it's not just the size. It's the build. Unlike modern bears, the short-faced bear had long legs and a relatively lightweight frame for its height, which has led scientists to a disturbing conclusion: it may have been built to cover ground efficiently, possibly to travel huge distances, dominating the landscape, claiming kills, and intimidating every other predator out of its territory. With a head that size and a body that powerful, Arctotherium likely didn't have to hunt very hard at all. It could simply walk up to any other predator on a fresh kill, and that predator would leave. When you are the largest meat-eating land mammal on the continent, you don't ask. You arrive. And once again, this was not some unimaginably distant creature. The giant short-faced bears lived during the Ice Age, sharing their world with early humans. Our ancestors lived in a world that contained a bear taller than a basketball hoop, fast enough to run them down, strong enough to break them in half. Every time you feel safe walking through the woods, remember, for most of human history, the woods had things like this in them. So we've seen a bug the size of a car, a snake longer than a bus, a venomous lizard, a killer bird, a hell pig, and the largest carnivorous mammal of all time. Which brings us back to the skull. The 3-foot skull, with no body, that started this whole thing. Remember the skull. Nearly 3 feet long, jaws built to crush, pulled out of the Mongolian desert with no skeleton attached. It belonged to Andrewsarchus, and to this day, it is one of the most mysterious large mammals that ever lived, because that single skull is still essentially all we have. No complete skeleton has ever been found. Everything else, its size, its body, its lifestyle, is reconstructed from one enormous, bone-crushing head. But what a head it was! Based on that skull, Andrewsarchus is often considered the largest meat-eating land mammal of its kind ever discovered, an animal that lived around 45 million years ago, after the dinosaurs, with a mouth full of teeth that could both shear flesh and crack bone. The most likely picture is a massive, long snout, hoofed predator scavenger prowling the coastlines and floodplains of ancient Mongolia, using that monstrous jaw to crush turtles, shellfish, and the carcasses of huge prehistoric mammals. A bone crusher on a scale that makes a modern hyena look like a house pet. And here's the part that ties this whole video together. Andrewsarchus was a hoofed mammal. Its closest relatives are part of the same broad group that, on one branch, eventually led to whales. The most monstrous land predator of its age belonged to a gentle, hoofed family tree, and its cousins would one day walk into the ocean and become the largest animals on Earth. Evolution doesn't follow the rules we expect. The scariest face in the prehistoric world sat on a branch of the family that gave us dolphins. That single skull, snarling out of the Mongolian sandstone, is a reminder of how little we actually know, and how much the prehistoric land had waiting in it, long after the last dinosaur fell. So the next time someone tells you the dinosaurs were the scariest animals that ever lived, remember everything that came before them and after them: a millipede the size of a car, a snake longer than a bus, a venomous lizard that hunted our ancestors, a 10-foot killer bird, a bone-crushing hell pig, a bear that could look into a second-story window, and a snarling skull we still barely understand. The land was never safe. For almost all of history, walking across open ground meant sharing it with monsters. We just happen to live in the rare, quiet moment after they're gone. If you made it this far, you're exactly who this channel is for. Tell me in the comments which one of these you'd least want to meet on a walk. I read every single one. Subscribe, because the prehistoric world has plenty more nightmares where these came from. And there's another deep dive waiting for you on screen right now. I'll see you in the next one.